Before we get in and use an expression to create our fake 3D extruded text, it's probably important to talk about exactly what an expression is if you're not familiar with what they do. What you can utilize expressions for inside of After Effects is to create and/or link complex animations that could conceivably take hours to create and potentially tens, hundreds, or even thousands of keyframes. Now, the example that we're going to use in this lesson is the wiggle expression. I'm just going to create a new layer of text, and why don't we call it, appropriately enough, wiggle. I'm going to take wiggle and we're just going to place it more or less towards the middle of the screen here. Now, if we wanted to get in and give this text a little bit of a wiggle, what the process normally would be is we'd press P on the keyboard to call up the position parameter. We'd add a keyframe, we'd come down, we'd adjust its position, we'd come down, we'd adjust that position. Now you can start to see how this process could be a few keyframes, potentially even hundreds of keyframes, and depending on how long your composition is, could take you quite a while to do. Let's just undo what I just did here to put our text right back towards the middle of the screen. What I want to do is I want to activate the expression for the position parameter. Now, you'll remember that when we came in to add the keyframe, I simply clicked on that time vary stopwatch, or as I like to call it, the keyframe toggle button. I clicked on it and we added a keyframe. But if I undo that and hold Option on the Mac, Alt on Windows, and I click the exact same button, you'll notice that something has changed. We now have the ability to enter text into the expression for position. You'll also notice that the keyframe values, or the position for X and Y values, have changed to be red from what they were before. What we're now going to do is enter the expression for wiggle. I'm simply going to type in, appropriately enough, wiggle. I'm going to put in a left bracket, and I'm going to put 10, 200, and I'm going to put a right bracket to close off this expression. Believe it or not, that's as simple as this expression is to create a wiggle for our text. I'm either going to click enter on the keyboard, or I'm going to click anywhere else in the After Effects interface, and you'll notice as soon as I do, our text immediately jumps up to the upper left-hand side of the screen. Now you might be thinking, well, why did it do that? Well, this is actually part of the wiggle expression, and you'll notice that now as I drag through my text, our text is doing just that. It's wiggling all over the place. What makes working with expressions very cool is that you can also add other parameters in on top of them, like motion blur as an example. I'll just turn motion blur on, and you'll now see that as our text moves, it has realistic motion blur with it. Now you're probably wondering, well, this looks a little bit odd considering you put in an X value of 10 and a Y value of 200 in that expression, except for the fact that that's not what those two numbers represent. 10 represents how many wiggles do we want to have per second. In our case, 10 wiggles per second. And what the 200 represents is a pixel value that After Effects is going to use to determine where that wiggle is going to go. Let's just not make it as extreme as it is. Let's just put this 200 value down to be something like 50. Once I do that, you'll now see that our wiggle is a lot less than it was before. So you can see that what could conceivably take minutes or possibly even hours to create, we've literally created in a matter of seconds using an expression. Now, we're going to utilize that idea of cutting down the amount of time it takes to do something when it comes to creating the fake extrusion of our text. And I want to talk about that in our next lesson.